Russia broke free from the shackles of Soviet reign more than 10 years ago. Today, believers are once again free to express their faith, and Orthodox Christians have regained their place in a country they have helped shape for over a millennium. Russia's Catholics, who number just 1,300,000 and are a much smaller group, are also keen to live in peace with the country's other citizens. The majority of Russia's Catholics can be found in communities of German, French, and in particular Polish origin. This can create problems. Coexistence would appear to be far from simple. Indeed, in some cases, there is even evidence of ingrained misunderstanding, but both sides are aware of this problem, and all, above all those of most modern means, are demonstrating a true willingness to solve it. So, will the followers of the Orthodox and Catholic churches become the Cain and Abel of Russia's newfound freedom, or will they be united by common hope? Previously a journalist with the daily newspaper La Croix, Father Bernard Lelianek is the current priest of Saint Louis of the French.
In May 1989, I travelled to Russia with Cardinal Lustig. I was invited by the Russian Orthodox Church to spend a year in the monastery of the Trinity of St. Serge. It was the first time that a Catholic priest had been officially invited to live for a whole year in the monastery of the Trinity of St. Serge, which is essentially the very heart of Orthodox Russia. It is the place where all of Orthodox Russia comes to regain spiritual strength. When I arrived at the monastery in Russia, I didn't know the language at all and had only very little knowledge of Eastern traditions. Like a child, I had to learn to live in this new country.
Assumptionist Robert Fortin also served a ministry in Moscow during the last stages of communism.
The Soviets were seeking recognition from the other countries of the world. President Roosevelt agreed to this, but under specific conditions. And one of these conditions was that American nationals should be granted freedom to pursue the religion of their choice in the Soviet Union, just as they would at home. It was thus that the American chaplain became the priest of St. Louis of the French.
The parish of St. Louis of the French was created in 1789 by the French community living in exile after the Revolution. The church, which was built in 1830, is one of the only churches in Moscow that has never once been closed, even during the darkest hours of Stalinism and despite being located on the doorstep of the KGB building. Every Sunday in this church, a series of masses is held for the different communities belonging to the church, French and Russian of course, but also Spanish, British, African, and even Vietnamese and Chinese.
I believe that a problem exists between the Russian Catholics and Russian Orthodoxy. To my mind, it's essentially a political issue. They really aren't very different. There are perhaps a few disparities in terms of liturgy, but basically the two are the same.
But a different light is shed on this hope by those living in both worlds day to day through their relationships with their partners.
I focus on the positive things about the Orthodox Church. My husband is Orthodox, but it's not easy. Russia's Orthodox Church is terribly insular and wary of Catholics. I feel this resistance much more here than I did in my dealings with Orthodox followers in France. Here it can be hard.
I have quite a different view of the Catholic Church, having married a Catholic. And I think my wife also sees the Orthodox Church differently than if she had not married an Orthodox. So it's an enriching experience for both of us. I don't believe that it drives us apart. On the contrary, I would say it brings us together. But it does make our joint life difficult because we are not able to share everything we do.
This incomplete union and the suffering it causes symbolize what is happening on a larger scale between these two Christian faiths in Russia. Although persecution and the desecration of churches began as soon as Lenin and the Bolsheviks came into power, it was Stalin who instigated a truly murderous campaign in Russia in this respect. The state was determined to eradicate all images of any faith other than communism. Today, the stories told by the victims of this campaign and the tremendous injustices they suffered seem quite unbelievable. Orthodox and Catholic Christians across the Soviet Union were united by this process of extermination. Irina Sofronitskaya often shares her memories of this era with Father Lulyanek. She knows that he is able to understand and relive with her what is essentially the basis of her faith today.
I grew up in a family of Russian intellectuals, but my mother had most influence on me. She worked at the university. We were a very discreet family. They never said that they were religious. When I was 17 years old, my father was arrested. I was in a state of shock. He was sentenced to 10 years of isolated imprisonment with no correspondence. We knew then that that meant certain and immediate death. I never saw my father again after his arrest.
With just one word from Stalin, millions of Christians were deported to camps in Siberia. "200,000 priests from both faiths were arrested and more than 3/4 were sentenced to death and executed. Monsignor Pinevaux, who was consecrated Bishop of Moscow and given the task of restoring the Catholic hierarchy in Russia, had his visa cancelled and was expelled from the country. Mrs. Ott, the woman in charge of the parish of St. Louis, was arrested with her daughter and both were sent to the camps for 15 years.
It was All Saints' Day, and I was coming out of church. In Russia, All Saints' Day is a day like any other. But as a Catholic, I was celebrating it as I usually would. After the Eucharistic fast, I was hungry, and I was heading towards the university. I stopped off in a shop to buy something to eat, and as I was coming out, a young man approached me. I didn't know him. He spoke to me in a brusque and familiar manner and said,